up, guys?
Howdy, brothers.
Welcome back to another episode of Whiskey and Water.
We are back at it once again from the virtual studio because I may or may not.
Here we are.
Here we are because you know your girl may or may not still have COVID. So we are pending a negative test.
Yes,
just keeping it safe.
Yeah, so here we are. We hope you guys have had a great weekend, great week. Whenever you choose to listen to this, we have a really interesting episode on with Dr. Caroline Leaf.
Yes,
we had more time with her.
I know. We had a hard out with her, so we didn't get to like fully deep dive on everything that we would have liked to, but she still gave us so much incredible insight and information. She's truly so intelligent. She's a neuroscientist. She's a book author. She is
of like a ton of like dozens of books. Like she has many books under her belt. It's insane. She's definitely extremely intelligent and gifted, and just shares a lot of her perspective on mental health, anxiety, depression, the labels that we put on people with these I guess not illnesses. Being in these situations. It's a really interesting take on mental health. Mm-hmm. And although we didn't get to really deep dive and ask her a bunch of questions, she has a lot of really great resources on her Instagram. She just came out with a book, which I'm definitely going to order and read, called what was it?
Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess.
Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. And I just
Which is
love that.
5 simple proven steps to reduce anxiety, stress, and toxic thinking.
Really powerful stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be giving that a read as well because, your girl's down bad sometimes.
Yeah, so, she's truly just an expert in her field and just extremely impressive.
Yeah. But before we get into that, let's do a little catch up, brother. What's good with you?
Yeah. So, by the way, I full on my Wi-Fi was getting hacked by some probably people in a different country during our interview. So just be prepared for that to happen. I full on had a Wi-Fi cyber attack. So that's fun. Aside from that, I do want to make a disclaimer that this episode can be triggering for some people. We do talk a lot about mental health and depression. There's some discussion about suicide. So just warning you guys, if you're in a sensitive place or if you would rather not listen at this time, that is okay too. Just want to throw that out there. Mm-hmm. So trigger warning for that. Other than that, we have what's new over here. Well, we have some exciting news, and I guess I can say we're fully decided as of yesterday, I suppose, but Tyler and I are selling our duplex.
Wow.
Which is a really big move for us because the original plan was to keep it as a rental property. However, with the market the way it is, we feel like it would be a missed opportunity to not capitalize on the profit we could make from selling it. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting, scary, not totally sure what our next move would be. We don't know if we would have it in the contract for us to stay here and rent from the owner for a year, because we can write that in the contract, or if we would just go ahead and rent a place until the market went back down and we felt like we were ready to buy. So we have a lot of different options that we're weighing out, but I'm excited and a little emotional only because we did renovate it, and I feel like
you're emotionally attached to it.
I 100% am. I couldn't sleep the other night, and I went through my renovation highlight on Instagram, and I was just getting emo. We did that.
You really did.
That was a whole ass fucking thing.
It really truly was, and it's wild. I can't believe you're deciding to sell it. That's actually crazy.
I know, it is crazy, and at first I was very on the fence because I was I don't want to be that person who just jumps and makes an impulsive decision for some quick profit. But once we put the numbers on paper and saw that it would actually be dumb to not sell it, it made more sense and made me feel more comfortable.
Yeah, 100%. When you're getting such a large margin off of it that you can reinvest into the next property.
We're getting capital that we wouldn't have, without doing it. And by the time this, the area comes up, it makes sense. And also what was the tipping point for us was the duplex across the street just sold mm-hmm. within the week. And for $175,000 more than what we bought this for.
That's
So
crazy.
yeah, and like although that wasn't the original plan, things change and you have to be able to pivot. So that's what we're doing. So
Yeah.
now I'm like, okay, this was just a long-term flip. That's what this was.
Yeah.
We'll call it that.
So yeah, that's crazy.
I know.
So when are you guys gonna list it?
Like stat,
Really?
like within the week. Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah, things are happening really fast.
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah.
Ooh, wow. You guys could be out of that bitch ASAP.
I know. It's like scary and I haven't even really like given it any thought. This is my first time telling Jess, by the way, guys.
Yeah,
Like
no, I don't even know anything about this.
Yeah, so and it was just decided. So I still need to like process it and like try to figure out next steps and whatnot with everything going on. I just haven't. But exciting nonetheless. I enjoy change, so looking forward to, and I enjoy money. So, it's all good.
We love that for you.
What's new in your life, brother?
Nothing's really new. I mean, I've still just been, quarantining, doing my dad thing. But I am so my lease ends in November, and I just got a letter from my fucking building, and they're like asking me if I'm like renewing and shit, right? And fucking my rent is going up by like close to $600,
which is
month.
Crazy.
I mean, like it's
the audacity.
Insane. The audacity.
But they can do it. They
can because it's fucking high in demand, and just as the housing market is increasing, so is the rental market. So I mean, yeah, people are fucking paying those prices right now. And
also for the listeners, like Jess moved into the building when it was brand new. So they had a lot of like move-in incentives.
Yeah, a ton. So like I'm also losing all of those move-in incentives. There's like ridiculous fees, like a $400 like amenity fee. And it's like, what the fuck am I paying for during rent?
Jesus.
I mean, yeah, like $50 for like trash every month, like just a lot of like little tacked on stuff like that on top of like the $600. So
what do you think?
So Danny and I definitely won't be staying here, unfortunately, like, because I mean, we can't justify spending,
that's insane. Like most of the time people, like when people get their rent raise, it's like
usually like $100,
100, maybe 150, maybe 200, like at worst.
It's
like,
usually between like 550 and 200. Yeah.
Like, that's like really insane. And they know that it's such a crazy market that they can do it and they will get people renting it out. So it's like,
so
kind of feels like price gouging.
Staying here. It is. It does feel like price gouging. So, kind of shit out of luck here. I don't think I was going to stay anyway. I am looking into Fort Lauderdale because, my girl's there, and I don't know. I just feel like Miami might not. Yeah, I feel like Miami might not be it for me. I don't know. I'm like still like feeling out a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It's also
oh my God, brother, is this like a new season of our life?
I don't know.
I guess so. Kind of feels like it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking into a lot of stuff. I'm really tired of living in like a high rise. So I think if I did move somewhere, if I were to do like an apartment, I would do something that's a little bit more boutique that like doesn't have like 40 floors.
It's like 20 units or like 30 units. Like
something smaller. I definitely want something like that has more character, in it. I hate like
the modernness of it all.
Yeah, I don't know. And I also want like a 2-bedroom. I kind of need a 2-bedroom. So that's also like a challenge, affording like a 2-bedroom place on a 1-person salary. So,
100%.
Fort Lauderdale's a little bit cheaper. And I've been looking at like houses and stuff for like, living in like a nicer duplex or something like that.
Yeah.
So I've been saving some stuff on the Zillow.
Okay.
Gotta talk to a realtor, see what's good.
This is crazy. Yeah. Things are happening.
Yeah. Things are happening.
Things are definitely happening. I remember moving you into that apartment during the pandemic. That was the first time I like saw you again. After you had COVID, actually.
Yeah. That was a year ago.
Sometimes, yeah.
That was like
crazy.
Almost exactly a year ago, yeah.
Oh, how things have changed.
Truly.
But also haven't because we're still in pandemic. But it's fine. Everything's fine. You guys will love this episode. Please send it to a friend who you feel like would benefit from just like hearing this different perspective. I will like warn you guys, I feel like it could be controversial to a lot of people.
It's a hot take.
It is definitely a hot take. So,
but, I mean,
go into it with an open mind, I would say.
Yeah. I would agree. I would emphasize the same.
Yeah, definitely go into it with open mind, and we think you guys will love it. Make sure to send it to a friend. take a screenshot, let us know you're listening. If you haven't left us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, please do. That really helps us out and helps us get discovered by new listeners, which we need all the help we can get, so we would appreciate it. And check out our YouTube, because our YouTube channel be popping. We're posting extra content on there, doing little bonus vlogs and whatnot, trying to get that channel growing. So if you're not subscribed there, go ahead and do that. And we will go into our ad break before hopping into the episode.
All right, guys, we are talking to you once again about RSP Nutrition, one of our current fave sponsors. I'm going to be talking to you guys today about AminoLean. AminoLean is an all-in-one energy and weight management product. AminoLean is made by RSP Nutrition, which makes clean, active nutrition products.
It contains essential amino acids, which is a building block for lean muscle building. And Jess knows all about that dump truck life.
We're really out here, and RSP Nutrition is helping me get there.
Yes. It provides mental focus and energy, and it aids with weight management. And unlike other energy products, it's made from natural caffeine, so there's no jitters, there's no crash, and it actually can be taken as a coffee replacement. Fun fact.
Love that.
Yeah.
It's 0 calories, 0 sugar, gluten-free for all of my gluten-free babies out there. It has 125 milligrams of natural caffeine from fermented tea leaves to support energy levels, focus, and alertness. So make sure you guys go check them out. We have a link in our description.
Yes, and AminoLean is actually now the #1 pre-workout for women on Amazon, and Whole Foods just picked up AminoLean in every store. So if you guys want to check it out, you can go to Whole Foods and get it for yourself.
Hell yeah, brothers. Go try it out. All right, guys, we are on with Dr. Caroline Leaf. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you. Both of you. I'm really doing great and thrilled to be with you.
Oh, thank you. I always love when we have someone on with an accent because I feel like it spices everything up here.
It really does. I know.
Now I have such a weird accent. It's such a mixture of, because I'm from Zimbabwe with British Italian parents and grew up in South Africa and live in the States. And so I don't quite know what my accent is.
Oh, whole mix.
She's just a melting pot of a person.
That is beautiful. We love it.
And where do you live now?
In Dallas, Texas, of all places. Yeah.
It's so random. But for our audience who isn't already acquainted with you, please just give us a little bit of background on who you are and what led you up to this point.
Absolutely. Well, I've been involved in mind-brain research for the last 38 years. So I'm actually a clinical neuroscientist and cognitive neuroscientist and communication pathologist. And what all that means is that I study psychoneurobiology, which is mind-brain-body connection. So what are thoughts? What are emotions? What are memories? Do we have agency? Can we control them? What is the mind? What is the brain? What does the brain do? How does the brain change? All that kind of stuff. And I started my work back in the 80s. It's in neuroscience and part medicine. I did a combination of degrees and started doing research in neuroplasticity with people with traumatic brain injuries, and worked with people with autism and Alzheimer's and dementias and learning disabilities and severe traumas and so on. Did a lot of work in South Africa. I was there for 25 years working in the with the wealthiest of the wealthy as well as the poorest of the poor in the terrible apartheid system, the transition with Mandela, the post-apartheid system. So I worked in communities helping with education, changes in education, helping people with emotional de-escalation, working in those areas. And I learned in that, also doing concurrent to running my clinical practice, I was doing extensive research in these areas to try and understand mind and resilience. And I don't do research in a lab. I don't bring people out of reality. I go into their world and work with them in their world and do a lot of long-term studies. So, and then I do come back and do sort of clinical studies of that. And so that has shown me over these 38 years that our mind is first cause. And if we don't understand our mind, which is the most important thing, we're going to just stay a mess, and life is going to really overwhelm us. And we've actually hit a point in history, very interesting, just besides the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, we've hit a point where with all the advances in technology and medicine, people are dying younger. For decades, people have been living longer, but we're now in a period of history where people are dying 8 to 25 years younger. And the age group most affected are your age group, between 25 and 64, so kind of our age group. And that should not be like that. So all of that put together has motivated me to take the clinical research, clinical application, and put that into continuing research. And now, I train physicians, I do conferences, I write books, I do podcasts, teaching people how to manage their mind and understand these concepts so that we can just improve who we are as humans.
Wow.
It's a
Incredible.
quick Cliff Notes.
Yes, so
No,
good.
I mean,
No,
that was incredible. I mean,
yeah. Go ahead.
I hope I aspire to be so concise about my work one day. But I mean, I feel like you're just such an amazing guest to have on, because our podcast is about female entrepreneurship and women in business. And a lot of that is always coupled with mental health. And we always try to shed light on that aspect and how important it is to have, healthy mental health. And so I would love to talk about, that kind of aspect of things, which is you actually recently released a book which is called Your Mental Mess.
Cleaning up your mental mess. Yeah, cleaning up your mental mess. There it is.
She has it right there. So cute. I would love for you to expand a little bit more on what kind of inspired you to write that book, as well as, some of your favorite aspects of that book.
Oh, with pleasure. So I've written many books, and I'd say this is my favorite. And I think that always happens. Your most recent book's always your favorite book, because the story of science and the story of humanity is never written. So you keep on changing. So your most recent work's always your most favorite work. But essentially, it's a compilation of everything that I've ever done put into what I feel are the most important aspects and simple applications. So in my work, I didn't want to just develop techniques and give people techniques, because that's kind of like going into a garden of weeds and chopping off the heads. You never get to the roots, and the weeds keep growing back. And that's what I saw, is if you just teach people techniques, you're not going to really manage mental health. You're not going to really grow as a person. You're not going to really fix those underlying learning problems or prevent the dementias and that kind of thing. So I wanted to go deeper and see, how do you get the weeds out the garden? And that concept has driven my research and has been encapsulated in this book. So the first half really deals with the concept of what mental health actually is. And there's two narratives, and we can talk about that. Then the second half is the system that I've developed, that you can put any technique you want into that. And that helps you to get your mind driving your brain in the right direction. So there's many places that we can start, but at some point we should maybe talk about the difference between the mind and the brain. But perhaps I should start with what mental health is and isn't, and then we can maybe dive into the depths of mind, brain, and all that stuff, thoughts and what all that stuff is, and what is agency, and how do you as women entrepreneurs manage your mind when you're managing life and all the traumas and that kind of stuff. So mental health, our current narrative of mental health is very, very negative. And as you probably have read and heard, we're saying, oh, there's another not me, I don't say this, but there's another pandemic coming, and that's the mental health pandemic because of the COVID pandemic. And I mean, it's just all fear mongering. And when you put fear into people, that whole environment affects you. You process that into your brain. And I'm going to explain that in a bit more depth in the next part, the next question or area. But basically, whatever you're exposed to, you merge with that and you build that into your brain and into your gene code. And if it's fear driven, you basically get brain damage. So if we submit to this very negative narrative about mental health, it's actually quite damaging to how we function, just listening to the narrative. So the narrative that's damaging is that if you have depression, you have a disease, and it's a disease of the brain. And that's kind of the current narrative, and that you have to then get treatment and a label, and generally the treatment is medication and hopefully a little bit of therapy or a combination of those. And a lot of the therapy is replacing the negative thoughts, just like put a new thought, just take the negative thought and just replace it. Now, you can't do that. That's putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It's not going to work. You have to get the bullet out. So that narrative is not successful, and that narrative has been the narrative that's been growing for the last 38 years. And I've watched this in my trajectory of my career, and we're landing up now on this side of that philosophy, and it's contributing to the increase in death. So when you don't allow people to have a narrative and to explore the reason why they feel like they do, and deconstruct and reconstruct, and instead you just say, oh, depression doesn't matter where it comes from, don't worry about the root, just if you have clinical depression, here's the medication, let's replace the thoughts, maybe a bit of psychotherapy that goes round and round in circles, and you find that, oh, that's the reason why I feel sad. But no one really teaches you how to go beyond the awareness into how do I then reconstruct my life to move forward, and what is the time frame involved, and what's normal in terms of, I shouldn't say the word normal, but what is the actual time frame for creating change? Because if you don't do things long enough, you don't change them. Then you'll sit there in a total frustrated state with this is my narrative of what I know I should be and why I'm like I am, but I can't seem to bridge the chasm to where I should be. And so the current narrative has to produce that sort of thing. Then the pandemic hits, and it affected different age groups, as we know, in different ways. And major depression, and depression's not an illness, it's a signal. So depression, anxiety, and all these things are not illnesses. This is the other narrative. They're not illnesses. They are actually symptoms or signals of an underlying cause. Very different. So as opposed to depression being a disease of the brain, which it's not, because you can't actually prove that. It's not proven. There's no neurobiological evidence for that. What we see is that someone gets depressed because they've been isolated through COVID, or they're an 18-year-old and they can't go to university, and where's the hope for the future, and that whole experience, or you've just finished 24 and you've just finished university, or 23, and you're supposed to now go and get a job, and you can't get jobs because you're isolated, and we're not designed for isolation. We die from isolation, and all the things of COVID, and then the threat of uncertainty of death and getting sick, and all these pandemic things that we've, on top of what we've already experienced. It may have been bullying at school, or bullying in a marriage, or abuse as a child, or life, the big stuff, being badly treated on social media, having a bad business experience, life, the traumas of life. Traumas happen every day to everyone in different degrees. And that's what we need to do. Instead of saying, okay, put all that life stuff aside, just look at the symptoms and say, okay, you have a disease like cancer or diabetes, and here's your treatment. That hasn't worked. That's caused an increase in death. The medications shorten lifespan, and not being able to process keeps it inside of you. When you keep stuff inside of you, it explodes and damages your brain and your body, and increases your vulnerability to disease by 35 to 98%. So that is not working. What we need is a narrative that has actually worked in the past, is scientifically shown to be effective, and when I explain it, it's the gut truth. It's being a human. And that is, if you're depressed and anxious, you're not brain diseased. You are responding to something that's going on in your life. It's very valid to feel extreme depression and extreme anxiety if you've lost all your money during COVID, or if you've lost your job, or if you can't see friends, or you can't have of course it's going to be that you're going to have extreme depression or extreme anxiety. It's not a disease, it's a response. It's a response. It's a warning signal telling you that not that you are now brain disease, but that you are having a response to an adverse circumstance. So what we have to do is accept that there's a story behind the depression, and there's a reason that you're showing up with the anxiety, the depression, the bodily symptoms, the perspective of life sucks, or whatever it may be, overwhelm, burnout, the whole lot that's affecting your creativity and your business, and you can't think, and kids, and whatever life. There's a narrative. That narrative needs to be processed. We need to honor the person's narrative, the person's story. Telling them that they have a disease locks them into a label. And we see from the research, when you lock a person into a label, you actually make them worse. They don't get better. So we have to throw that narrative of disease out, and disease of the brain out. And we have to look at it completely different. Throw everything, go back to the starting point, go back to what we call the null hypothesis, go back to zero and say, okay, well, what is it? You and I are humans. The three of us are humans. The listeners and viewers are humans. We are alive. We're in life. And so life affects us. You cannot take us out of being affected by life. Everything that's going on around you, every person, every circumstance, good and bad, is affecting how you function. But you are uniquely you. You have a unique way that you think, feel, and choose. And you have a unique way that you're perceiving all the events and circumstances of your life. You can't control the events and circumstances because they're the result of other people's choices, and the global choices, and the collective choices of mankind, like about climate change, etc. Years and years of bad decisions in terms of running, fossil fuels and all kinds of stuff that they have. So in other words, everything around us is cumulatively the result of humans using their mind to make choices, to make things happen, and then those all affect us. Yep. And we're all part of that. So we're in this one big mix, and those stories of life affect our stories. And so therefore, if they're adverse, and there's a multitude of adverse on varying degrees. Obviously, a rape or war trauma is extreme trauma versus a really ugly post on social media, or a really bad comment maybe about a podcast, which throws you and makes you mad and upset, and maybe makes you feel a little bit, ooh, am I good enough? Versus, which is still, that's trauma. That's a level of trauma. But it's not maybe at the same degree as someone who's obviously raped or abused or war trauma, or lost a loved one, something like that. But it's all still levels of trauma. So we need to come into life as us in stories, and some of these stories are traumatic, and the trauma does affect us because we process them. We can't control them. We can't control what happens to us. We can't change what's happened to us, but we can change what's in us. So what is the in us? The in us is the result of us processing the experience. In us is in our brain and our body and our mind. So how are we doing that? As humans, we are sitting here listening to this podcast and having this discussion. We are humans doing this. What's doing it? What part of us is doing this ability that we have to discuss? It's our mind.
Right.
So mind is this ability that we have as humans to think and feel and choose in response to what we are hearing, feeling, touching, experiencing, etc. So mind is those three things. Mind is how we think, feel, choose. Mind is first cause. It's the dominant factor. The difference between a dead person and an alive person is mind. Because if I had a dead person sitting next to me now, you had a dead person sitting next to you, they couldn't do anything. Their body would be disintegrating. We could put all the technology on their body and brain and nothing would be responding. But in your brains and your bodies, we can put EKGs on your heart. We can put EEGs in your brain. We can stick you in a fMRI. We're going to see responses because of your mind. Your mind is generating this energy. And as mind hits brain, it's separate. As mind hits brain, then there's this magical relationship where the brain responds on an electrical, chemical, and genetic level. And then the brain then sends messages through the entire body, and we have 37 to 100 trillion cells. And every single cell of the body and the brain and the mind, because it's three different things, are all taking this experience, and the mind's taking all of it and building it into the brain and into the body. So the mind shows up in the brain and the body as physical structures and physical responses. And that's what we call psychoneurobiology. And that whole process, as you're in life, things happen. So it builds in your brain. And let's say it's a horrible experience. It builds in your brain. And that's messy. That's the messiness of the mind because of the messiness of life. And that's okay. It happens. It's inevitable. You can't avoid it. And it builds into your brain as a mess, as a toxic protein mess. It looks like a toxic protein mess. I've got this wiry tree, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. And it also changes your gene code. It changes the epigenetics and changes how your genes mutate and how the genes function. And that's why it shows up in our body. That's why we have body memory from traumas and that kind of stuff. And it's also in the gravitational fields and electromagnetic forces of your mind. So it's in three places. Mm-hmm. So it's showing up in these three, it's stored in these three places. So that's how mind is showing up. And then that then produces what we say and what we do. So the ability of me now to speak about this stuff is because I have used my mind to study this stuff, build healthy trees in my brain about mental health, mind, brain. And now I'm talking from these thoughts.
Right.
Mm-hmm. See, so whatever we do is first experienced into brain and body, and then we use it. And that process can be controlled. So if it's toxic, if we want to fix a trauma or we want to fix a toxic habit, we have to look at what is being produced. What is the end? In other words, what am I saying? What am I doing? How am I functioning in my relationships, in my life, in my business, my creativity, my physical feelings, my attitude to life? All of those will tell me, they're all warning signals that will tell me that this is how I'm showing up. This is the pattern. And from that pattern, I can then, because I know that pattern is produced by a thought in the brain, which came from thinking, feeling, and choosing in the mind, I can actually track back. I can track back and retrace my steps back down to the root cause or the origin story. And then I can reconstruct that, deconstruct it, reconstruct it into something that works for me to give me peace and clarity and wisdom, so that I can't change the abuse. I can't change the fact that you've got COVID second time. You can't change the fact that whatever, but you can change how it plays out into the future. So you don't have to, for example, and I'll use your example. Who's who again? Who's Jessica? You, okay. So Jessica, your second time you've got COVID. So yes, your brain is going to be affected, but if you do brain building, you can actually prevent a lot of the damage in your brain. So in other words, you can change by deconstructing and reconstructing, you can change how your memory plays out into the future. You can keep your memory healthy. So I mean, that's a practical example. Someone who's abused or has gone through a terrible business experience, lost their business and tried multiple times, and just you're talking about business entrepreneurs and women have been, sexism and all the things that come against us as women in business. And I'm a woman in business. I know about it. We go to places, and I'm the doctor, my husband isn't. And the people will go up to my husband and say, "Hi, Dr. Leaf." You know, the sexist assumptions. I sit in a group of scientists of males and I'm the only female. They hardly let me talk. I actually stand up and talk. You know, we've all had those. It's changing now because of the content of what I say, but that's what we are fighting. And those are traumas. So we need to recognize those and deconstruct and reconstruct and decide how we want that to play out in our future. And that's the power that we have. That's the agency that we have. And that's called mind management. We can manage our minds by looking at our patterns and change how that plays out into our future. And that's in essence what mental health is. Mental health is the recognition of, if I have depression, anxiety, frustration, those are signals, those are symptoms, those are warning signals. They are not diseases. First, that's fantastic to know. That's not who I am. It's who I've become because of. That's fantastic to know. That's already bringing hope. It already changes 1,400 neurophysiological responses, just those two statements. And then you can say, okay, well, if I'm showing up like this, if this is my pattern from the emotions, physical symptoms, behaviors, perspective, etc., there's 4 categories. Then I can actually do something about this, because it's not who I am, but it's affecting who I want to be. So I want to change this. You have the agency and the power to do that. Now, you may be in a state where if you take depression and anxiety and the degrees of trauma, if you take a number line from 0 to 10 on.
All right, guys, if you notice a brief lapse in the recording, it's because Olivia's Wi-Fi is currently getting hacked. So we were cut a little short, but Dr. Caroline is going to pick it up right now.
Back. Hi, guys. I'm glad that your hacking is hopefully stopped. Okay, so essentially I was saying about the fact that depression and anxiety are warning signals as opposed to being seen as a disease. So the narrative that is much more hopeful with mental health is one where you'll feel more in control and you give yourself permission to feel any kind of emotion. So no emotion is bad. Every single emotion is a messenger. And that's the narrative that is much more hopeful. So sometimes our emotions slide beyond the bell curve where we can kind of feel like we're managing. It can get extreme. Right. And that's like, for example, in COVID, and the anxiety has tripled. So that doesn't mean that they are triple the amount of people with brain disease. That's a terrible way of looking at it. Mm-hmm. What it means is that anxiety, that 3 times more people have slipped beyond -4 and are in the -5 to -10 zone. And understandably so, because we just don't know what's going on. Right. And hopefully things are getting better as we learn more and as science advances and so on and so on. So we have to start reconstructing our stories. And that's like anything. So this narrative that I'm presenting that's extremely scientific, that is actually pretty ancient and over the last thousands of years, and is this concept of our emotions being a very normal part of being a human in response to life, and that we need to own them, process them, reconceptualize them in order to move forward, versus you've got a brain disease, replace the thought, take the medication, right. Take the label. That's, you know, you just think of it. If you're going out for dinner with a group of friends and you come in and you sit down and you throw down your bag on the table and you say, oh my gosh, I've just been to my psychiatrist and I've got this, and you know what, I've got this neuropsychiatric brain disease. They've labeled me with bipolar and schizophrenia and put me on 6 different meds. All of you are going to go, oh gosh, what is that? And you like, there's this whole scary thing like a cancer diagnosis. Now this person's crazy and are they dangerous, and all the narratives around that, versus if that same dinner, start again from the beginning, the person comes in, throws down their purse on the chair, whatever, and says, oh, I've had such a week. And these things been going on in my life for weeks now. So I actually went to my therapist and I sat down and I realized, hey, there is a reason why. And then they tell you this whole story. This happened and that happened. And you know, I haven't been sharing with you, but this is what's been going on in my life. So if I've been a bit difficult lately, this is why. Everyone will lean in and everyone will say, oh, I'm so sorry. How can we help you? Hey, you know what? I get it. I've got this going on in my life. In other words, the deep, meaningful connection will happen in the second narrative, where you're being allowed to have your story, process your story, have it without the shame and the stigma of, oh, I've got a mental health disease, I've got a brain disease, right. Which makes me different. It makes me maybe dangerous. It makes me weird. It makes me crazy. Affects job applications, friendships, insurance claims, everything. Versus to the point where you can rather say, hey, I'm going through stuff and it's been really bad. Maybe it's to the point where you haven't been able to get out of bed for a month. And that's okay, because you are going through something and you've got to feel it to heal it. And that's the narrative that I'm trying to bring to the party. And so if you as a woman entrepreneur running your own business and you are experiencing emotions, no emotion is bad. Every emotion is telling you a story. Every emotion is a messenger. And if you follow the trace, the route, and become a thought detective, and you say, okay, there's the emotion. What are the behaviors associated with the emotion? What are my physical symptoms in my body? Maybe you've got increased GI symptoms. Maybe there's increased cardiac issues, whatever. We've all got, there's no one pattern. Everyone's different. What is my general perspective towards life? And you honestly and openly stand back and observe yourself and say, this is not who I am, but I'm showing up in this way. But it's definitely affecting everything, and I want to change this. I'm losing my peace, I'm losing my clarity, I'm losing my creativity, which I need to function as a business owner, as a woman entrepreneur, as a wife, mother, whatever you are, whatever combination you are. And give yourself permission to go through that messiness. And then in giving yourself permission, then you go into the process where you can repair, and then you can grow. You can't repair and grow if you don't have the mess. So the way we are designed, our in conclusion to this part of the question, is that the way we are designed as humans in our psychoneurobiology is to make mistakes, is to make a mess, because in the mess you learn and repair. So we are supposed to be messy, but we're also supposed to be looking at the mess, repairing and growing and moving forward. The current narrative says you mustn't be a mess. If you're a mess, there's something wrong with you, inherently wrong with you, which attacks you as a person and your value and your identity, which is terrible. That's why people commit suicide. Or I shouldn't say the word commit, that's a terrible word, that people will choose suicide because they've lost value in themselves. They've lost their identity. They've been shaped by a narrative that is not a good narrative. Yeah. And there's something you can do that no one else can do. And all of us live on that. That's our core reason why we are there. There's something I can do that no one else can do. And I want to share that to help someone else. That's the core of who we are as humans. And if that's blocked by labels and by other, all these messages, then that affects who we are, and it will affect our entrepreneurial skills, it will affect our functionality.
So much to unpack. I have so many notes that I just wrote down. I love your stance on things, and I have to imagine that this belief system might be like a bit controversial, because it's something that, we talk about mental health a lot, but with mental health, we also talk about diagnosing people, and I think it's a hard conversation to navigate. And I like your take on it, because I feel like it is, not putting a label on someone, and it kind of takes away the guilt and the shame, like you had mentioned, and it's validating for someone to hear, like, I am not,
depression.
I am not depression. I'm going through a situation where it happens to put me in a depressive episode. And I think there's so much power in that. We talk a lot about, like, not identifying with our thoughts. And I think that's so powerful too. And it sounds like that's kind of something you believe in, is just like being an observer of your thoughts versus being immersed in your thoughts, and like studying your own thought patterns, which we're also always trying to encourage our listeners to do, because if you're not like watching, and listening to that self-talk, it can really go into a downward
spiral.
It can go a lot of places.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a really, really interesting and powerful take on it.
And that's what it really is. We've made something that isn't, we've taken extreme states like the -9 and 10, where the hallucinations and disassociations and things like that occur, the scary, really scary stuff, which are just coping mechanisms. It's just a mind that's broken and a brain that's from a terrible situation. And it's just it's a state of coping, and it's a temporary state.
Like survival.
It's a survival state. It's not a disease state that will be with you forever. But if you medicate that, the reason people stay sick is because the medication keeps them sick. It doesn't make them better. It numbs the brain, and it's like an anesthetic, and it's basically shortens lifespan. And, there's a whole bunch of science behind what I've just said as well. So in terms of the labeling, initially a label might give someone a level of comfort, because when you're feeling so overwhelmed and you don't understand this, and the narrative out there is one of, you two look like you're in your late 20s, or am I right? Sort of in your late 20s? And okay, so I'm a lot older than you. I'm 58. So that have been exposed to a narrative in your whole upbringing of one of psychiatric diagnoses. That's all you've heard.
Right.
It's not what I heard. It's not what I grew up with. So so in other words, there's you're in the new narrative and it's not working. So you haven't heard it. So it's not your fault that you talk about mental health in that way, because that's what you have been presented with. It's all you've heard. So if I lectured to a group of students 20 years ago or 25 or 30 years ago, they would understand all this mind-brain story and the story of your life being the reason why you are showing up in such a way. Now, today, if I go to a high school or a talk, which I do all the time, and I talk about this perception, I mean, this my narrative of it being not a disease, the response is the same as yours. Oh, wow, this is different. We told it's a disease and it's a diagnosis, and that it's a stigma, that we're shaming people if we don't allow them to say my disease. The minute you say my disease, what are you owning? What are you owning? And the mind-brain connection is such that as you say my disease, you change your neurophysiology immediately. And it's not in a good direction. It's not in a direction that's going to help you heal. So initially a diagnosis may make you feel better, but depression is not an it. You can't actually have depression. You experience it as an emotion. It's like you can't have anger. You can't have frustration. You can't have happiness. You experience them. They are part of your response to what's going on in your life. So you have a great conversation, you feel elated. That's not, you can't have elation. You are experiencing elation. Depression is the same thing. You have a very sad experience. You're experiencing depression. It's how you are processing it.
Yeah.
And when you shift it like that, so we see Gen Z, for example, is the most medicated generation, and they have the worst prediction in terms of lifespan and health of any generation prior, because of the fact that they've grown up medicated and labeled, and the most medicated generation. And that's what I'm trying to change, because that is a crime. It's a crime that we're going to have the sickest, Gen Z is going to be the sickest and youngest dying population ever, and that has to change. We have to stop that like now, and that's because of this narrative that's come in. So you'll hear psychiatrists talk, and I mean, I work with a lot of psychiatrists, and we'll have debates, and there's psychiatrists that are totally supported. There's a large group of psychiatrists that will say exactly what I'm saying. Then you'll have a large group of psychiatrists that will say, no, it's a brain disease, because that's how they're trained. They spend 4 years learning about medications and labels and symptoms, and that's all that their training is. And there's only a little bit of psychotherapy thrown in. So I'm not knocking a psychiatrist, but that's their training, that's their orientation. And so if that's all you've been immersed in for 12 years, because they've had biomedical model for 12 years of training, you're going to look at a human as a physical thing, and you're not going to look at the person's mind as being the dominant factor. But if you look at the actual science, the 150 years, and then go back thousands of years into the ancient literature, we have to look at people's stories. We have to take away, we're going to cope as a community and cope as humanity and get through things like global pandemics. We're going to have to stop saying you are mentally ill, or X% of people have mental illness. We've got to throw that out, and we've got to say that the percentage isn't that they have mental illness, it's the percentage of people that are battling with extreme states. So it's extreme symptoms versus mental illness.
Right.
So I'm not denying that depression needs attention. I'm saying actually that it needs more attention than what has been given. I'm saying it's so important. It's such a messenger. It's a gift. An absolute gift, because it's telling you something very significant about what's going on in your life. If you embrace that depression and you process it and you reconceptualize it, you are going to find a story behind it, and then you can make it work for you. You can reconstruct it to make it work for you. But if you see depression as a clinical illness like cancer, there's a feeling of hopelessness, there's a lack of agency, there's my brain's damaged. I'm one of those percentages. What I've got to medicate it, and then the medication might for a season numb you to the point where you can get through the day, whereas you couldn't get through the day before. So now you can get out of bed and you can actually function, but then it has side effects, and the side effects are so bad that you go to the doctor and they say, oh, the depression's got worse, the illness is coming back. That's absolute nonsense. There's no science behind that. What is happening is that your brain is battling with the medication, and your body's battling with the medication. So it's sending you warning signals to say, hey, something's off balance. And so instead of reading the off balance and maybe taping the person off the antidepressant or the antipsychotic and then going into a healthy nutritional psychiatry, and I work with a lot of nutritional psychiatrists, and going into a good exercise program, and most important, getting mind management in place and good therapy in place and good coaching. Instead of that, you get polypharmacy, multiple drugs.
Right.
And unfortunately, your generation, your age group are in the most vulnerable age group. Gen Z plus from Gen Z up to 65 are in the age group. And I'm not trying to bring gloom and doom, but if you have knowledge, you have power. So your life expectancy has been chopped by 8 to 25 years. And the 25 years section is if you've had a mental diagnosis. If you haven't had a mental diagnosis, you're going to have 8 years, you're going to die about 8 to 10 years younger. If you've had a mental diagnosis and you're on medication, you're going to die about 20 to 25 years younger. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. That's just what the statistics are saying. How can you change that? By changing your narrative of mental health, by saying, okay, I give myself permission to be a human.
Right.
If life is tough and things are hard, it's okay to be a mess. How can I clean it up? What do I need to clean it up? I need a system of mind management, which I can offer you. That's why I've developed the neurocycle. And I also recommend you get into therapy, coaching, counseling, that you have a support group, that you talk the stuff out, that you get it out, because they're volcanoes. And I'll show you these little thought trees again in a moment. That you get into, that you talk about these things, that you have a support group, that you listen to these kind of podcasts, get the knowledge, because knowledge is power. Yeah. If you're on medication, don't stop immediately, because if you stop like that, your withdrawal will be so bad that you're potentially at risk for suicide and that kind of stuff. Medication increases chance of suicide. Antidepressants increase chance, all of them, all the psychotropics, antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety meds, all increase the state of the potential for suicide. Things like Lyme disease, which is becoming more and more recognized and common, also leads to psychiatric symptoms. So if you're battling, you need to look at a whole lot of factors. If you're on these drugs, don't just stop them. Get with a doctor who will help you taper off them. And tapering means that it's microdosing. So you reduce daily by minimal amounts. And as you're reducing, you then get into look at your nutrition, look at nutritional psychiatry concepts, look at exercise, and most importantly of all, get into mind management and get into therapy. Doing that and talking about that and being open will then allow someone else who listens to you who's battling, they'll do it, because they were too shy to even talk about it. They were pretending that things were okay and they weren't. Yeah. Only 3% of leaders are talking about mental health. So you fall into the leadership because you are leading people. You have people that follow you, and you're one of the 3% of leaders that are talking about mental health. So we've got to increase that. We've got to increase our platforms to get people talking about it, because as we talk about how we're battling and how we're managing what we're going through, so we give permission to those that follow us to do the same thing, and then the people that follow them, because everyone's a leader of someone. Everyone's leading someone because everyone's unique.
Yep.
And so we then get this thing, growing like wildfire. And that's the movement I'm trying to create.
Yeah. Wow. So good. So good.
Yeah. It's definitely just like a fresh perspective that I haven't heard for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. It is definitely like a generational thing, like
mm-hmm.
that's all we're used to hearing is getting diagnosed for things. And I think what we assumed it was is that it would bring people comfort, like you said, even if it's mm-hmm. temporary. It's like, because they finally feel like they have they have a reason, like they have something to almost blame, not blame, but No.
I mean,
that reason is very valid, because if we are having a emotion like depression that's consuming, so it's like in the -5, -6, whatever, and it's affecting our functionality, creativity, running our business, relationships, then for the doctor to tell you have this, oh, that's why I'm like that.
That's why.
But you can't have, because it's an empty promise, because once you've gone beyond the, oh, I have this, then what does it mean? So there is no reason. Depression is not a reason. Depression as a clinical diagnosis is not a reason. What the reason is why you've depressed in the first place. So the reason is the story, and the story is in the root. So if you think of this, of a structure of a tree, if you plant a seed, it then grows roots. Let me take the healthy one first. It grows roots, and then the roots, so the seed to the roots, to the stalk, to the branches. And so it will grow over time as you water it, and it gets light and energy and fuel, etc., etc. Now, that's a healthy one. And this discussion would be a healthy thought. So everything I'm saying, everything we're discussing is the source. The podcast becomes the source. In other words, it's the roots. The branches are the listener's interpretation of what we're saying.
Right.
And so you have a source and you have an interpretation. Now take that to the toxic. If you've had a toxic experience, that's the root. And then this is the interpretation. So someone, for example, who's sexually abused, their interpretation and the emotions are like glue, and they're inside these memories. These are the branches are the memories. This is the thought, and these are the memories. Those are the root memories. Those are the branch memories. The interpretation would be, I am shame. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve this. This is who I, all I, this is whatever. Or it's so distorted. The whole processing is distorted. And that's a coping mechanism, but it's not sustainable, because that then invades other ways of thinking. So if you are going to now have this, definitely will lead to levels of clinically diagnosed anxiety and depression, because if it's not managed, it's inevitable. It disrupts your immune system. These things are real. They're made of proteins. They disrupt everything in your body down to your DNA. So if you have a diagnosis and someone tells you you have a clinical diagnosis, that feels like a reason, but it's an empty reason. What is the real reason? The abuse. Right. So you have to ignore the label, because it's empty. It's an empty box. It's a gift that has got nothing in it. But this approach is a gift that it's an endless gift. It just keeps giving, because it's a bottomless gift. It's just always giving, because you then see the symptom as the signals, like the smoke signals coming off here, which will then take you to, how do I see myself? What are my thoughts and memories, emotions, detail, down to the cause? And once I find that, neuroscience shows that the minute you become aware of this, you actually then weaken this. As soon as you weaken this, you get control. So if you get a clinical diagnosis, you lose control. That still controls you. If you do what I'm telling you, you're getting control. You're getting agency back. You're finding the root cause. Then you can deconstruct it. Weakens physically in your brain. Neuroscience shows that these protein branches fall apart. Then you can reconstruct it into, okay, that happened to me, but how do I want this to play out into my future? And then that happens in cycles of 63 days. And to do that process is the neurocycle.
So cool.
Mic drop.
I know, so cool. I want to talk to you like literally all day and night, but
it's fascinating stuff, isn't it? It's
fascinating.
Truly. And
and
honestly,
I've got another interview in 5 minutes. Literally.
we're gonna let you go ASAP.
Yeah.
But no, we do really appreciate you taking the time to, divulge this information. I think that it is liberating, because, as someone who I guess previously identified as, struggled with, depression and anxiety, these things are liberating to hear, because it's,
you're normal. You're just a normal human being battling with whatever happened to you. It's okay. It's okay to be a mess. We have to tell us it's okay. And I think what's really important is once you've got to the okay, how do I clean it up? And I don't have time to teach that now, but it's in the book, as you've seen, the system that I've developed over 38 years of clinical research and science, scientific. It's so important that this is not just a nice to have. This is a system, and you can put all kinds of techniques. It's also in an app, and that's really nice, because you can use the two together. It's like literally you're giving you therapy. So the app's called the Neurocycle, and it's available like in any app, iTunes and Google Play, and I'm constantly upgrading and developing it. But that literally walks you through cycles of 63 days, helping you to take this whole message of depression, anxiety is not a disease. It's a symptom of, what is the symptom? What is the reason? And then to deconstruct and reconstruct.
Incredible. So amazing.
Thank you.
We will let you go. If you don't mind, we want to ask one last question. You can just answer with one sentence. And we wrap this up with every guest. What is the best advice you've ever received? Or a mantra, just something quick off the top of your head, maybe.
This thing of there's so much, but the thing of self-regulation, being aware of yourself, is the years ago one of my professors said to me, pursue this thing of mind brain and really learn how to understand what this is. And that was the best advice I received, because it led me to this whole thing of, we've got to learn to self-regulate, and we can do it. And then the other thing is constant learning. I am a scientist. My story is not written. I am constantly doing new research. That's why I put clinical trials into the book. So keep on learning. That's been the best advice that I have received and will give. Self-regulate and learn.
Thank you so much. Where can our audience find you and find more of you and follow your journey on social media?
Absolutely. Well, my podcast is called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. Same name as my latest book, which is available everywhere where books are sold. My Wi-Fi. I've got Wi-Fi on the brain. My webpage is drleaf.com. My Instagram is Dr. Caroline Leaf. Obviously from Instagram you can get everywhere. So, and the app's available on iTunes and Google Play.
Yay,
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot, tag us, tag Dr. Leaf, and we will see you here next week.
Bye, guys.